The local communities. So maybe have you experienced any dilemmas around this? Is it problematic moving to the smaller ones, or is it perfect? Is that the answer for everything, basically? Jan?
I suppose it's where you put your risk, isn't it? Procurement, to a large extent, is about risk management. And if you want exactly what you had yesterday, then a good company is very well situated to deliver that. But big companies aren't necessarily good companies, and big companies are inherently inagile. Government organizations are already inagile, so teaming them up with another organization that's inagile is not going to give them a lot of innovation, in my experience. I mean, there are examples where we've led procurement processes for local government, where we were able to. So there's one example, a project that we've realised in northeast London, in Edmonton, one of the most deprived areas in all of England, with significant barriers to education, to employment, and environmental challenges for communities. And it was the desire of the local authority not just to invest in the built project itself, but to invest in the local economy and in skills surrounding that project too. So we drew up a local procurement plan, and there were 4 project components. It was about transforming a library into a multifunctional educational and entertainment hub. It was about public artwork and public space improvement. It was about creating workspaces, and it was about environmental improvement outside of school. And we managed to implement that project, procuring all the different services, design services that we needed, as well as the works, just using local actors. And it does require a little bit of innovative thinking. So there weren't any companies that were able to take on the library contract as one contract. So we split it into 2 and did a works contract and a fit-out contract, which suddenly there were people who were able to take up that work. It can absolutely be achieved. There isn't a one solution fits all. You've got to look at each project and its requirements, but there is a huge amount of social value that you can realize through the procurement process. And by standardizing it too much and not looking at the opportunities that you have in that particular instant and how to realize and implement them, you're really missing a trick. And with that, I come to sort of second bugbear and opportunity around procurement. We're now all obliged to score a social value offer in our procurement contracts. Nobody really understands what social value is, and it's a huge challenge. And if it's a challenge for the public sector, you can only imagine what a challenge that is for the private sector who aren't that conversant in that field. So quite often, what exactly the social value offer should be is being left up to the supplier to define. The supplier doesn't actually know what the need is locally, so things are offered that don't really have a big impact, and yet it makes up often 20% of the scoring of a whole procurement exercise. So there's a massively missed opportunity here. So what's happened recently, and which I'm really excited about, is there's a master plan in South London being developed with loads and loads of contracts being let. And we were working together with a community organisation that were given a site to install a temporary garden and educational building that would start to serve the community surrounding the development. And that whole project was almost exclusively delivered by leveraging the social value from all the contracts on the big site. Where we simply said, we need somebody to install the heating. Who will do that? And people put their hands up, because actually public sector organizations that work for the private sector organizations that work for the public sector do have an interest in the social objectives that the public sector has genuinely, but they just don't have the insight. And making that link is something that we're now exploring with the big housing provider in the UK, looking at they're building housing everywhere, and how can we leverage all that social value that goes through their contracts for placemaking.
Thank you. Amazing example. So it's also kind of an intermediary role, I think. Do we need somebody to translate between the sectors or to make it a little bit go smoother, or in your experience, is that what you were doing
Well,
when you...
I suppose it is. I mean, procurement in its definition is really simple, but it's being made very complicated. And I think it really helps. My role is sometimes to go back to the basics and say, this isn't so hard. This isn't so difficult. We just need to make sure it's fair and that you get best value. Those are obligations that we're all on board with. And it's that reminder role to say, no, it's not about kilometers of forms. It's not about different portals. And it's not about that. None of that's sort of relevant. And that role I sometimes have reminding people of the simplicity of the process.
What a lovely role. Thank you. Camilla, any reflections on the whole small, large companies divide dilemma, or maybe not a dilemma?
Yeah, like we work mainly with pilot projects. So like for those startups are okay, but sometimes we also see, and we see more and more those collaborations coming. We're talking about public-private collaboration, but actually startup can collaborate with big IT company. And we saw that several times in Lithuania, where the startup had an amazing idea, but no capacity, not enough capacity to build the whole system. But then they collaborate with big tech company, and like, you know, they bring the idea and like the innovative technology, and they bring the capacity to build the system at scale. And this, we see this happening more and more. But basically, to bring those innovative ideas, you need to have the space, and also like talking about the language, and you know, being those, like we consider ourselves sometimes also an interpreter between public sector and private sector. You need to create the space, and you need to create the ways for those innovative ideas to come up. You need to let people like think about like, you know, think about those challenges. So at the like, you know, we are also like, so in our process, we are working closely with both public sector and private sector when the private sector comes through the procurement. But from the very beginning, like public sector comes with the problems, and we spend sometimes up to 3 months translating those problems into the challenges, which can be interesting for the private sector. And it's a difficult job to do, because public sector thinks that everyone understands their language. It's very easy, like, you know, we put those 30 or 40 pages, you know, there, and everything is clear, and it's not. And also, if we want those innovative ideas, you need to make this language sexy. Just like, you know, you need to make it interesting and challenging for private sector to apply. So we work a lot on those, like with both parties, so one understand another. We work with startups so they understand why bureaucracies work as they work, like, you know, why the processes are so long, you know. So they also like set their expectations. But also we work with public sector, not only on translation of the language of the procurement, but also we show them how startups work, why you cannot procure from startup huge program for, like, you know, and pay them after 2 years, because they will not survive. They don't understand that it's just like 3 or 5 people, you know, who are building those, and they don't have. This is not like big tech companies who can wait for the payment. So then you need to put that in procurement, that you'll pay them every 3 months, so they will also have the capacity to work and to build the solution. So we're trying to involve as many partners as possible, to have all the right stakeholders on board, also like end users, but I think that we're gonna maybe talk about it a bit later, who needs to be involved. But we are trying to translate, because everyone speaks different languages, everyone comes from different planets, and we put, like my team puts a lot of effort to be this interpreter and the bridge between all those different parties.
Thank you. Again, coming up with the languages, and I think you also both touching upon, like we started with, what is the need? What is the problem we're actually trying to solve here? And maybe also use the entire toolbox. Like if you have a hammer in your hand, you just approach everything like it's a nail. You need to pound a little bit. So what are the various things that make sense in various contexts as well, that it's not one size fits all for anything. To no surprise to anyone, I guess, but we still keep doing that, trying to use the same processes, the same thinking over and over again, and getting results that we aren't really that happy with. So thank you for those examples as well. Tamara, any reflections on the small companies, large companies, interaction with the public sector in terms of procurement as well?
I'm not sure if I'm skipping ahead, but I might
Go ahead.
reframe from small to large, because it's really hard to generalize. Obviously, bigger ones are in a better position to bid, but obviously there is stigma around them. But I think what we should really be looking at, what values are they bringing to make government, putting government in better position to be self-sustainable and serve public better over time. Though there was a scary exercise I did in Montenegro with my team when we opened up procurement data, and we found a trend that the trend showed that government worked with like the same, 4 vendors that were the friends of the ministers, and but that also, kind of allowed for everyone else that didn't emerge as a partner to then, realize, okay, so now we know what the trend is, and we have better conditions in place to actually bid in a fair way. And that's why things like pre-qualified procurements playlist and all the spaces that you all are nurturing intentionally to play that translator role is super important. But going back to different partners in this ecosystem that reflect some of the values that I shared at the beginning, and not just like, your private sector vendor, but how are they bringing back that, building that capacity in government so that government can be more self-sustainable. So that thinking through academia and NGOs, for example, we worked really closely with organizations like Georgetown and Beck Center and Aspen. They came up with playbooks that gave the politicians, what are the first 100 days, actions, the things that they should do and put in place, levers that they should put in place around procurement, around upskilling the workforce that was handling procurement. How do you write an effective RFP? So constantly growing that understanding and opening those playbooks, opening those lessons learned, right? There are organizations right now, and you all are probably aware of them, who are focusing on digital public infrastructure, and they are building software collaboratively. So this is an area where we could, instead of like Montenegro, build this thing on their own, leveraging what's already out there, but not just leveraging the code, but truly intentionally cultivating that community of practice that later on could be used by any other country, or procuring that system together with like with Kosovo and doing it together as a team. And then partners open data partners with tech that are leveraging our data to build solutions, and then in the same time are training and or showing what's possible to some of the some of the public servants, and then building, helping them build the skills as well. And then with private sector, some of the ways they were able to add value and sort of build that, help us build that internal capacity was by giving us their amazing, humans. And Mikey was also talking about this before. They would leave private organizations for a stint, a tour of duty for 3 to 6 months, and they would also, in interim positions, product, engineering, design, content, they would work shoulder to shoulder with our teammates to build that capacity in-house, which is what Rebel Alliance is trying to also capitalize on and leverage. So I'm thinking about ways that we can collaborate with not just private sector, but all of these players to build that capacity, internal capacity.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent example. You both of you touched upon this. How do we get private sector to actually want to work in and with the public sector as well? And I think those are you've had 2 different hacks, using the social clauses in the contracts, because they actually want to help us out. And you with I don't want to call it, it's not an internship, but I just think it's a brilliant idea. Have them come in and do something good together, and everybody will be living in perfect harmony afterwards. Okay, let's do a little bit of a quick round on who's actually in this football field that we call procurement. And we're talking backstage that none of us are like the procurement experts in our organizations, and we're just curious because we seem to never, we go to different conferences, so just like a show of hand in the room. Does anybody here identify as either a procurement specialist or somebody whose main task is procuring for the public sector? Yes, I saw at least one hand here. Yeah, excellent. No, we're just saying we never actually meet. So let's talk about this football field that we're playing in here. So just a quick round. Who are the players in the football field of procurement? Who's there and who are we missing? Camilla?
So I think that, there are so many players, so many stakeholders, so many people in the public sector, in the organization, like the management, the experts in the field, the procurement team, the procurement department. We have like companies, so suppliers. We have end users who unfortunately are very rarely involved. We still see that in many countries, and Lithuania is one of them, that public sector thinks that they know, public organization thinks that they know what is needed, even if it's for end user, if end users are citizens, or the end user is, I don't know, the other organization, let's say it's municipality procuring something for the school. Very rarely the school is being involved from the very beginning, from the very beginning when they are preparing for the procurement. But another thing, I think that when talking about innovation, innovation procurement, so the field which I work in, procurement experts are very rarely involved. So those are people they are brainstorming in the organization with management, with the experts, sometimes experts from companies. What do we need to procure? And then we just give the task to the procurement team, and now you do you. And actually, procurement team, when talking about different methods, they are the gatekeepers. They say this is impossible. We will do it this way because we know we used to this way. We are doing it for 30 years, and this is impossible. So I see, and as you mentioned, we are no procurement experts. And I'm speaking for last few years. I spoke I don't know how many times about the procurement, and never in any panel I saw anyone from the actually procurement expert. So I think that they should be involved. They should be those methods should be taught. They should understand why we are why we're trying to use something differently, what value it will bring to the organization. So I would say that we are missing end users, of course, but also we rarely think when talking about the procurement department.
So on the field, we're basically having a lot of level of the public sector organization, and the end users and the procurement experts, they're outside of the field.
Suppliers. So suppliers are playing with the public sector organizations.
Yeah. Jan, who do you see in the football field? Who's there and who are we missing?
It's a sort of, I think we're playing a really unfair game on behalf of the procurement team, because the procurement team is expected to understand what all of us do in all those different departments with all those different ambitions and all those other objectives. And actually, they're being given a square ball to play with quite often, I think. In my mind, I mean, sometimes I wonder whether their position is unwinnable with that square ball, and whether we're better off investing their time and expertise in training those people who actually are letting and managing those projects in doing their own procurement, because they know what they want, they know what sort of organizations out there that can supply that service or those goods. They understand what the key parameters are that we need to insist on through the procurement process. Is it social value? Is it speed? Is it cost? And to come up with an idea and put that on somebody's desk who does procurement seems just a recipe for disaster, if you ask me.
Yeah. So this might go horribly wrong. I'm going to try to sum it up with even more football metaphors, right? So we wanted to, so basically we need to change the game from procurement experts playing with a square ball, to still have the procurement people like on the field, but together with like in a more collaborative role, and then playing with together with the public sector who actually has the problem and the citizens who have the problem, and everybody actually meshing more together and playing with a round ball, and then the procurement offices basically spending their time teaching the people what they need to know so they can do the procurement. So they're more like in like a, are they the trainers?
They should be the trainers or the cheerleaders. I'm not sure I would put them on the playing field.
Okay, so
you
they
know?
should be the trainers instead.
They need to do the training and advance of the game, and they need to be the cheerleaders when you know, when the game is on, and they'll be probably sitting there biting their fingernails and well, putting their hand up if they've got to swap out a player, but. To have them on the playing field, I'm not sure it's their place, really.
Trainers and cheerleaders, who doesn't want that role? I think that's an amazing role for a procurement specialist as well. Tamara, briefly, who's in the football field, who isn't there, who should be there?
In the previous answer, I think I mentioned many different players, and these wonderful humans already said a lot. I'm just going to piggyback on that. It really resonated with Jan said around changing the rules of the game. And so what Camilla said, from gatekeepers to really procuring for capability and capacity. And so by outsourcing that Scrum team, even if we are you know, partnering with a vendor that builds in an agile user-centered way, we still miss out an opportunity to make changes to the process and policy improvements. So for those who listened to my presentation this morning, in the CalFresh example, we talked about how we put policy and tech at the same table. From the moment we started listening and understanding the pain points and needs of the users, we started streamlining processes and policy requirements. And I know that's a hard exercise to make, the one that you need a lot of political capital and everyone who both has an understanding and a capacity to actually make a decision on the fly. But yeah, I think it's building that internal delivery muscle. It's doing that user research with a vendor, and then applying those insights to both how we streamline policies and processes.
If we don't start with the needs, if we don't start with the problem amongst the people who actually have the problem, then that's a horrible space to move on from. And I think to a certain degree we've been somewhat good at doing that in the innovation field, but then we lose it when we move towards policy and procurement sometimes. Thank you. So the last lightning round here is if you could reinvent procurement, what would you do? Camilla?
Me personally, I would gamify the procurement. So it's fun, engaging, and rewarding for all stakeholders.
Yeah? Jan?
I think it'd have to be two things.
Yeah, go for it.
I think first thing, excuse me. The first thing is I would remove frameworks because I think they're fast lane to disaster. They qualify people who have a very generic offer to solve all your problems, and they don't tend to solve those problems very well. So that's the first thing I'd do. And the second thing that I would do is I would enable everybody who's running projects, managing projects, to manage their own procurement. And I think we'll get much better outcomes.
Thank you. How would you reinvent procurement?
All right, so AC gave us a challenge to make it sound sexy. So of course, I'm like, ChatGPT, make this sexy. So I threw a bunch of stuff and I asked him to make a song. And so this is what ChatGPT created the rap for us. In the world of procurement, let's make a change where values of equity and transparency reign. I'm not gonna, no more locking in, no more interdependency. It's time to reimagine, to set our goals free. How procuring for good looks like. It's about vision, values, taking a hike, explaining goals, not just requirements, a shift in mindset with new aspirations, from waterfall to agile, from static to dynamic, protocol-based financing where solutions are systemic. I'll skip to the last part because so let's reimagine procurement, make it look sexy. With equity and transparency, it's easy peasy, more upskilling public servants, more in-house muscle, just procuring for good in a world that's a hustle. But there's more.
We do have like 3 minutes left of our time on stage, but I want to finish with the ChatGPT song. Thank you so much, all of you guys, for making it. I hope we made it at least somewhat sexy, at least entertaining, at least enticing for you guys. There is more Danish numbers here, but thank you guys. Amazing panel. Let's give them a hand.